concerned with declining physical functions and financial vulnerability. Well, it might be true that some older people have medical and financial concerns. They also have a wide range of other interests and concerns that make up the lifestyle of many older people. And I did an analysis of Facebook images of 5 age groups produced by Swedish local authorities. I found that older people were visually represented in a less diverse manner when comparing them with the representation of younger age groups. And I also found that young age groups were represented with a variety of visual symbols identifying commercial corporations, mainly relating to sports and technology. However, older people were not related to any of these brand logos. And in this regard, I argue that older people were represented as inferior to the young in terms of physical and technological competence. The third example I want to introduce is the visual representations of older people that resonate social stereotypes of older people. Thank you, Laura. And for example, in the British magazine advertisements, and there were 4 major types of visual representation of older people, including frail and vulnerable, happy and affluent, mentors, and active and labor-oriented older people. And those have significantly resonated the social stereotypes of older people held by the society. And encountering stereotypes of older people in the media can actively impact the physical and the psychological functioning and social well-being of older people. Laura, could you please? Yeah. And lastly, I want to draw your special attention to the extremely positive images of older people, which have recently become more prominent in different contexts and in many types of visual media. And these visual representations of older people appear overly positive or externally useful. And the meanings generated by such representations are often consistent with the third age or successful age in discourse, which embodies the neoliberal principles of emphasizing individual responsibility and individual effort for managing the risks in the later life. And such representations risk making older people feel responsible for compensating for the loss of resources in later life. And those representations also serve to homogenize older people as being a wholly active and healthy group, regardless of their heterogeneous lifestyles, living conditions, and personal pursuits. Considering that there have been more and more so-called positive images of older people, we definitely need to question what meaning it generates and who produced those positive images and how it serves to further the agenda of media producers. And at the end of my presentation, I would like to highlight the complexity and nuance in the way older people are visually represented in the media. So we could discuss these complexities and other issues surrounding visual images of older people in the breakout rooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Wenxian. Wow, I think there is a lot of information and a lot to discuss. And I have seen that you have been chatting how media is portraying image that we don't feel, that they are how we feel, and also how you have debate a little bit. Really nice. You have seen now. You can see now on the screen 4 questions just to start a discussion during the breaking rooms. You don't need to answer them, and if you have other questions, as the one that you have seen on the chat, is also fine. On each breakout room, there will be 1 member of the Euroageism, my colleagues Laura, Wenxian, and 3 new colleagues, Federica, Itai, and Hannah. And the breakout rooms are going to last for 20 minutes. So I am going to press now the button and hopefully it works. So see you in 20 minutes.
Oh, well done. Isn't that clever? Join.
David, do you have an invitation? Have you received the invitation to join a break and group? Otherwise, I can send one again. Okay, there. And Eleanor, of course, and then Julie, you are here.
Yeah, Eleanor and I are going to wait here, but these are the two people.
Yeah, but it's fine. I forgot to click the button recorder in the beginning. But it's fine. So it's going pretty good, isn't it?
It is. So do you want to take the record off now while we have this time? Were you going to say a couple of words?
Who's asking me?
Oh, it's Julie. Sorry. Were you?
Yeah, I'll say a few words at the end if you like, Julie.
Absolutely fine. So when Lola finishes, we'll hand to
If
yourself.
you just hand over to me, and I'll just say a few words at the end about where we are with our campaign.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Should I not close it then, Sandy? You'll close it.
Sandy will close it. Yeah. Thank you.
So welcome back. We are still waiting for some colleagues who are still on their breakout rooms. Okay. I think that now we are all back. And what we have planned for these last 10 minutes of the webinar is to share a bit what you have discussed during on your rooms. So I have on breakout room 1, it was my colleague Hannah, who is in Vienna. I don't know if you have appointed someone or who want to report on breakout room 1.
I will be the one reporting on the very, very interesting discussion we have had actually. First, I mean, it was very prominent that older adults in the media are often seen as a problem. Like advertising aimed at older adults often makes older people responsible for not being active anymore or for becoming a burden to society. This is reflected in health-related media very often. Like there's this focus on health, while like the whole group agreed on the fact that this is not true. Like people are very active and they do a lot of different things. Like there's this huge diversity of what people like to do, older and younger people. And some people are actively volunteering, are caring, are like, they're very important contributions older persons make. And there was this notion that this is not so much reflected in the media, that it's very one-sided to some extent. Another issue discussed was the cultural differences, that in Western societies, there is more this negative portrayal of older persons, but maybe in other cultures, older persons are represented as wise and contributing. So there's this cultural component. What was discussed a lot is also that learning does not stop with age, and that especially with regard to technology, like we all never stop learning, young and old people, we never stop learning, and that this is also important and should be reflected in the media. Then what was said is that there is this differentiation between young and old in the media very often. There was also the idea that u3a should maybe portray much older persons, like there was this impression that the people reflected in the u3a advertisements are often too young, like they suggested to have a more diverse picture of older persons. And what else? What was also said is that older people are often reflected in the media as not doing anything, like just sitting there and reading, which is really not true, at least from what the group has said. Thanks to everyone.
That sounds a really incredible 20 minutes, I will say. Really, in a lot of research comments. And I totally agree that learning doesn't stop with age, but I think that many things doesn't stop with age neither. And group number 2, I have Laura. So who is going to report for
Yeah.
also you? Wonderful.
Yes, also me. Yeah, we also had a very fascinating discussion. I wish we had much longer than 20 minutes. And it's one of those things I always would love to be a fly on the wall in these discussions, and it's so nice to actually to be that. One of the points that was made is that, especially during COVID, the elderly or older people and vulnerability are equal. They've been sort of, if you are old, that means you are vulnerable. And when we talk about who was vulnerable to COVID, we mean the older people. And that is not representative of older people in general. They are not all vulnerable. Although some people are, but just like at any age, people are vulnerable, can be vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then something else is that the stereotypes that we see in the media can be quite patronizing. Or even if we hold up an older person and say, look at this, what they've done, and it's sort of a pat on the head, like, oh, good job, you're so old, you could still manage to do something like that. And so I think that the patronization is a very good point, that we see that a lot. And then even as we were discussing, it was interesting because it was easy to say, we are, as an older age group, or, as older people, we are not this, but younger people are this. And then we had to sort of step back and say, wait, maybe it's very easy to put in, to have an ageist perspective towards younger people as well. And it's something that is very invisible. This ageism, or the stereotyping of age groups, is something that we don't realize that we're doing a lot. And I think that's mostly the summary of our discussion.
Thank you very much, Laura. Something that I would like to share with all of you is that all these kind of inputs that you have got in these breakout rooms are really, really helpful to the Euroageism, because once we go to talk to policy stakeholders, our aim is to share this kind of ideas and these kind of experiences. So they are not going to be ours. They are going to say, hey, we have talked to stakeholders in many fields. And I cannot imagine better stakeholders than the university of their age, and also you. So thank you very much for being so open and honest in these breaking rooms. Definitely, we will take note of them. On breakout room number 3, I got Wenxian, and I don't know if who is going to present there.
We had very inspirational discussion, but we haven't got time to decide who is the volunteer. So I'm going to ask in my group who is going to be volunteer to bring highlights from our discussion. Or if no one wants, I can just try to summarize what we discussed before. So in the beginning of our discussion, we found that negative portrayals of older people before the pandemic and during pandemic are quite problematic. And also we found that negative portrayals are predominating in different types of media, like in newspapers. And also we want to highlight the diversity of older people, especially in the media representations. And also we want to find a balance between the positive portrayals and also the negative portrayals of older people, and trying to highlight the heterogeneity in old age or in later life. And the other highlight, we also discussed about cultural differences in media representation of older people among different cultures, like in China and in Japan, and they quite have a slightly different portrayal of older people in the media. But we also wondering we also posed some questions, but we haven't got that solved. For instance, what are the reasons behind it? Where are the representations come from? What lead to that problematic portrayals? And we also, at the end of discussion, I found quite interesting is we can see some impacts or in fact effects of those portrayals on our individuals. So for instance, how we perceive our old age and how do we perceive ourselves and how do we perceive the aging process. And so that also highlight the representations are really important, and we want to address that ageism in the media context. Thank you.
Also really nice topics and really nice questions. I am going to send on the chat the emails of Laura, Wenxian, and my email, because if there is any question that we didn't have time to approach, please feel free to write to any of us, and we will be really happy to contact you and answer the best that we can. Okay? And in number 4,
Lola, you are muted.
thank you, sorry. So now we go to breakout room number 4. I think that Federica was in the number 4. So who is going to?
Okay, we have the same issue as number 3. Super interesting discussion, but no voice or like speaker. I
thought we were 5.
Yes, great, Sue. Go ahead.
I thought we were group 5. Does it matter? Okay.
No, it's a perfect time.
Okay, fine. We were talking about the disproportionate value that was given to people of the same age, those that are in the media and those of us who are not. And that you wouldn't decry and call people like Helen Mirren and Paul McCartney as elderly and older person, and their image they would not associate with what many images are represented in the media. So there's a disproportionate and unfair valuing of people who are of the same age. So we had a discussion around that. And then we also looked at, from u3a's perspective, whether we actually do ourselves a disservice by focusing on third agers. It is part of the articles and the criteria for u3a as a charity. And we're not using that terminology now. We're not calling ourselves University of the Third Age. It is what we stand for, but u3a is the holistic name. So we have to rethink about how we speak about our membership criteria. And it's very much about those people who have finished working full-time, either full-time as a career or full-time working as a house person, family, bringing up a family. So we need to think about how we describe the membership, as well as never mind what the image is, it's the description. We also had a discussion around the word retire. Again, there is this connotation for many of the younger people coming towards that phase of their life. And this was brought up in a focus group that we had a couple of years ago. And there is this, again, a negative connotation with the word retiree and retirement. It's seen as almost a step down, almost as a sort of negative perception. So we've got to build that positive image, I think, for retirement. And then the other thing that we spoke about was how we represent ourselves. And if you look at, for me, we spoke about whether or not on social media, on our websites, when we're out in the public arena, that's where we can challenge any misconceptions or stereotypes of what an older person and a u3a member might look like and be represented by. And I think, for me, if you go to any website, whether it's the national, the UK one, or your local one, what is the image on that local website? What is the image on your social media platforms where you are representing people of our age? And to me, we can get away, I think, not to get away with, but I think we need to focus very much on the positive imagery where we can demonstrate that we are active, we are mobile, we are challenged, we are diverse, we are dynamic, all those positive images, but we need to do it for ourselves as well as challenging when we see it elsewhere, that this is not representative of us.
I cannot agree more with you, Sue. Definitely a really interesting discussion, the one that you have. And as you say in English, last but not least, the group of my colleague Itai, and I think that John is going to report on the group.
I am. I didn't step back fast enough. We spent a lot of time across a lot of subjects, so it's quite difficult to summarize it. But I'll try my best. The first thing that we considered was the way in which older people are represented by adverts which are actually targeted at older people. The stair lifts and all the rest of it, the baths with the doors that I don't think I'd ever trust, and always the people who are photographed as sitting on the stair lift or whatever are much younger than the age group that we would normally expect these sort of advertisements to be picked on or to be sent to. So they all look as if they're perfectly happy, they're perfectly healthy, there are no problems at all in their lives. So why would they want a stair lift? But nevertheless, they are there with that stair lift. Now, the feeling was that perhaps the reason that these are going is because they're targeting the adverts at who they think are affluent people. But that's not the case. Quite a lot of people are affluent in older age, but quite a lot of people aren't. And the sort of things that these particular adverts are being targeted to are not representative of the range of people who are older. We talked about the nomenclature, what we call people, and older adults was what one of the people thought would be a nice idea. But again, there was a feeling that, well, yes, older adults might work for now, but after a while, it would start to fade into the background in the same way as perhaps things like, words like teenagers used to be quite big, but now are much smaller. I'm not sure about all of that, but that was the way we were thinking. One of our members said that it was about perception, and that perception varies over time, so that it depends on who you are and who you're talking about. So when you're younger, if you talk about someone who's older, they might only be about 25 or 30. But when you're older and you talk about someone who's older, then they might be perhaps 90. It's all about where you are, who you're talking about, and who you are. So there's those perceptions. One of our members said that it was easy to count the cost of old age, in that you could count the numbers of people in residential homes and all the rest of it, and the health costs and everything else. But it was that much more difficult to quantify the advantages that older people bring to society. Old age was underplayed. And a couple of the other people here have mentioned that in different cultures, old age or older people are given a lot more respect than they're given in the Western societies like the UK and the US. One of our members mentioned that perhaps it might be we're looking at another industrial revolution, in that the older people have skills of all sorts, which are actually not being passed down through the generations, so that people now don't have the skills that older people had. And they have disappeared and they've become replaced with technology. Certainly, there's a lot of de-skilling that has happened around information technology. We're sometimes our worst enemies. We tend to be self-deprecating. We think that it might possibly be gender-related as well, in that women in particular, in the 50s sort of age we are now, tended to have to play down their roles. And it's only recently that perhaps has become addressed. But then in playing down their roles and their contributions, they've contributed to the perception of older people being quite perhaps not so capable as in fact we really are. Ambition is less, so perhaps people feel that tying themselves to our coat strings is no longer the way to the top. And one point one of our speakers made was, have we ever tried to complain about the perceptions or the presentations of older people in the media? Have we written to the editors of Saga magazine and said, look, you know, these people who are advertising the stair lifts and all the rest, they're not us. They don't look like us. I don't know where you found them from, but they're not generally representative of the audience that are reading the magazine. I'm sorry if it's a bit all over the place. I was scribbling like mad during all this, and it was quite difficult to draw it all together. But a lot of the themes are there. Cultural differences across the different countries, older people being held in more respect abroad. The media portrayal tends to be of people who are not dependent. They're people who have individual lifestyles and livelihoods, so they don't need to be looked after. The result being that people who do need to be looked after are considered to be perhaps less be able to make less of a contribution to society.
This is definitely a topic for 3 hours, as it was advertising, I will say. I cannot, and I think that I can talk on behalf of my colleagues of ESRs. This has been absolutely an amazing opportunity, and it's really important for us to try to join your thoughts about advocating for a different image about what media is doing or have traditional done. And it's part of our responsibility in Euroageism to raise awareness in policy stakeholders. And that is part of our aim in this network. I would really like to thank all of you for being here and for being active participants. This is the first webinar or a series of 3 webinars that we are going to talk. On May 12th, we are going to talk about ageism and healthcare. And then on May 25th, we are going to talk about ageism and technology. Please feel free to contact us if you want to share any thought, if you have any other question, or maybe you want to raise a new topic that we have not approached. We are really open to listen to your thoughts and your ideas. And on behalf of my colleagues and on behalf of Euroageism, thank you very much for hosting us. And to close the webinar, Eleanor Mer, she's going to talk with you. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much to all the researchers. It's been such a fascinating conversation. Actually, Sandy Rickaby, I think, has got something to say. So Sandy, over to you. But thank you so much to everyone. It's been really...
We lost your sound there, Eleanor, but can you all hear me? I hope you can.
Yes.
I'm Sandy Rickaby. I would like to say a very big thank you to you all. I'm a member of the Board of Directors and trustee for the North East of England. I'd like to say a very big thank you to you all for a really fascinating session. And it's just amazing how many different ways ageism is portrayed in the media. And I always think of it, there are 2 extremes. They always show the really ancient, decrepit, fallen to bits people, and those who are out, you know, fell running and skydiving and scuba diving and all that sort of thing. And they ignore the huge bulk of people in between. I always think of it as, where's the O? Is it, oh my word, aren't they clever? Or is it, oh, poor old thing, look, she's fallen to bits. And there's nothing really, that's not representational at all. For those of you in the u3a, we have got a Pushback Ageism campaign. We have a working group at the moment looking at the whole question of ageism, and it's twofold really. Our brief is to challenge ageism in whatever setting we find it, and also to promote positive aging. Of course, u3a is a great vehicle for showing positive aging. So within that, we are now currently identifying high-profile partners to work with us to form a coalition of positive aging so that we can lobby whoever needs to be lobbied and bring to the attention of whoever it needs to be brought to how unacceptable ageism really is to all of us. We have partners, people like Age UK, the Centre for Aging Better, of course, Euroageism, who've given us this very interesting webinar today, Independent Age, and many, many more have approached us, and we're currently working out who would be the best people for us to partner with. If you are interested in any aspects of it and would like to join the working party, you'd be more than welcome. Just get in touch with me or with Eleanor, would be fine. We'd be more than happy to have you come on board. Or if you can think of any partner organizations who would be good for us to join forces with as well, because I think a number of you have mentioned, so what are u3a doing? Well, this is what we're doing. We've got a push back ageism campaign. Okay, so that's all from me. And again, thank you. I look forward to the other two webinars. It's certainly been a fascinating afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've also put an email address in if you wanted to get in touch about the pushback on ageism. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Lost you again, Eleanor.